Alright, so we're getting ready to begin the floor coloring process with our first coat of TrueTone. We're going to be using the Frost stain today. So here we have clean shoes to be working on the surface with. We have our buffer head here, which goes on the bottom of our buffer. And then we have our 4100 buffing pads. So these are the thick white woven pads. Again, as mentioned in some of the other videos, that this center punch out is great for doing your cut-ins and your edging. You can also use these chip brushes. These are just kind of, they're general cheap solvent-proof chip brushes. They're good for just getting color in those corners, but you still don't want to just brush anything on. You always want to rub it back out so that you can put the color on with those and kind of move it around, but you really want to rub it in or hit it with a rag or your insert to really drive it into the wood. Okay, everybody, welcome back to day 2 of our wood flooring project at my father's house. You can see it's kind of hard to tell what color that we chose, but the floor is a nice consistent frost color. So it's a very light gray. And really what it kind of does is it keeps the wood looking kind of close to how it is when it's dry. You're not going to get the richness of a true oil. When you put the finish on, it's going to bring a little bit more richness out. But it does a really good job of keeping things very neutral and adding just a touch of gray compared to our white formulation. So what we have today is the TrueTone Buff-In Tung Oil finish, and that's what we'll be putting down today. And really we have the same buffer as before and a fresh, thick white woven pad to put it down with. And it's been 24 hours since we put it down. We've had fans going overnight. It smells very dry, it feels very dry, so we're ready to get coated. The one thing I would recommend is if you're going to allow any more time after you put your color coat down, the longer you wait, the more that color is going to be set in hard and you're going to pull less color off. So if you can add an extra day or an extra few hours with better air movement, that's always going to help your situation. So it's a good place to start. You can always check by on a corner or an inconspicuous area when you start. Make sure you're not pulling off too much color. Also in those hard dry areas like closets and things like that, that's where you're going to probably have the most issue with things drying really well. So get good air movement and we'll get right into it and we'll put the clear down. Okay, so we have our clear finish in our squirt ball here. We have our low RPM buffer with our thick white pad on there. We got shoe covers to keep it nice and clean. We got a couple of rags for run strips and cutting the edges. Either the puck from the center of the pad works, or I prefer a nice clean rag for edging. This helps kind of get to my corners better than those round pucks. But We're going to start by edging, and then we'll go ahead and buff the field. With the clear, you can get a little further ahead of yourself than the color in terms of edging. So you can go further. You're just kind of looking to get a nice shiny layer on there, but it shouldn't look super wet. So we'll go ahead and get started. So with the clear, it can be very difficult to see where you've actually done it, but you'll see a little bit of shine, and you'll also probably remove just a hint of color, especially on the edges where the color was probably a little thicker. So that's another thing, is a lot of times doing a clear coat is going to help even out any heavy areas of color, and also kind of remelt any thicker areas and help blend everything in. So if you pull a little bit of color off, that's fine. If you feel like you're pulling too much color off, give it more time to dry before you continue. So shall I start in the closet or an inconspicuous area? So we'll go ahead and continue on. So you can start with your buffer. You can pour a puddle near it, or what I prefer is pour it under the pad. That prevents you from slinging as much. Less drips flying around that you got to catch later, which are easy to see because they're shiny. But in general, if you tilt the buffer back, pour a little under the pad, it helps distribute that finish evenly throughout the pad, and it helps minimize your splatter. So a healthy squirt under the pad, and away we go. You definitely want to move a little quicker with the clear. That way you're not spending too long buffing off color. So buff it on and just keep moving. If you see any swirls or anything like, go back, but just kind of keep moving quickly. And we'll go ahead and finish the rest of this room. And again, we'll edge, and then we'll buff the field. So we've just finished buffing the first coat of clear down. I'll take a nice look down low to kind of see how even and matte sheen that is. We buffed on the clear as shown in some of those clips, and then we came back with a dry pad and buffed off excess and got it all nice and even. One thing that's good about putting this clear coat down is you will pull some color off, but it also helps you blend heavy areas, so especially when you're edging. If you feel like you were heavy in corners and stuff like that, that color will help break down anything that's still sitting on the surface of the wood. So if it's not down on the wood, and you can still have a chance to kind of do touch-ups. This first coat of clear does remove a touch of color, but it also helps blend everything in a little bit easier too. So we'll come back tomorrow, 24 hours later, and we'll buff on our third coat, which is the second coat of clear, and that'll just seal up any of these dried out areas of the wood, which you don't see many, but you can see some slight sheen differences, and mostly that's just the wood absorbing it a little differently. So we'll let this all settle overnight, and we'll come buff in the rest tomorrow. Okay, good morning everybody. It's day 3 here at my father's house, doing this TrueTone white oak floor with the frost color. Put our first coat of clear on yesterday, we're going to put our final coat of clear on today. In general, it looks very finished. If you look closely, there's a few boards that still look like they're a little starved. And again, a lot of times that 24 hours isn't really more for drying, it's allowing that product to soak into that wood a little bit deeper. Some woods are going to be done after that first coat of clear. Other boards, it's going to soak in, and some areas will look a little less glossy and will look a little starved. I'll show some examples of that here shortly on some close-ups. But we had fans going all night, everything is perfectly dry, there's no odor. You can see there's some debris on the floor possibly. That's one of the benefits of this product is it doesn't need to be super clean. You don't have a wet, sticky, tacky film that's drying. So dust is less of an issue. Obviously you don't want it to be super dirty, but you don't run the risk of hair sticking in it, debris, anything else sticking in it, especially if you're working in an area that's a construction site, where that's going to be much more common. So we'll do a little close-up here and then we'll get started. So here's a look at the living room area, and you can, if you get down nice and low, that's the best way to look at these floors, to look for any inconsistencies. It looks very consistent over the majority of the floor. The one thing we're seeing is there's a few boards in front of this window that look a little bit more starved. That's totally okay. Those are sealed, they're well sealed. This third coat's usually gonna take care of boards like that. So you see a nice matte sheen over everything, but a couple of those boards do look a little starved. So we'll go a little heavier in that area on this third coat, and we're ready to go. So just as before, coat 3, we got our bottom finish, buff and tongue finish. We got a fresh, clean, white, thick pad, our buffer. We got a rag for wiping on for the edges, and another rag for wiping off any drips or runs that may get onto the woodwork or the trim. And we'll just continue on like we did. Start by edging in. Again, this one's going to be pretty forgiving at a third coat. We're not going to put a whole lot down, so you can move pretty quickly. You can edge a big area. We already got one coat here, so we're just kind of trying to saturate unsaturated areas, or clean up any high stain areas, or get rid of any shiny spots that we didn't bleed back from the day before. But this floor is nice and tight, so we have no bleed back. Just going to buff down a nice thin coat. Look for that slight sheen over the surface to show that you did it. Don't leave too much excess. And then we're going to come back and buff off the excess and then final buff to kind of even everything, blend everything, and get right down to it. That first coat of clear, you probably would have noticed you pulled off a lot of color. You're going to still see some of that on this final coat, especially on the edging where you have some thicker areas, but it's going to be very minimal. You're not going to see a color change really, but you may see some on your applicator, so don't be too worried about that. And we did about 1,800 square feet yesterday. We used just over, probably like 2/3 of a gallon of finish. We should use even less of that today. But I would say always go a little heavier and then just buff off more excess as opposed to going too thin. So this is obviously going to be the hardest coat to see as you put it down. You can tell a little bit in the video, it's slightly shinier. So while it's kind of wet, it will look a little bit more sheen, a little bit more richness. The best thing to do is regularly get down nice and low, and then kind of highly identify where you have a wet product and where it's dry. Obviously, a little goes a long way, so I like to spread a puddle, and then just move quickly to distribute that puddle. You'll see this one might sling a little bit more because a lot less is soaking into the wood. So go back over and get your grips and things like that. We definitely will take care of that on the final buff off. But for this, you should use a lot less product, you'll be able to move quickly, and then we'll do final buff and you get everything out. So we've just completed the buff off for coat number 3, and that's kind of your final product. You have a nice even sheen over the surface. Any minor differences tend to settle out over the next few hours. Well, that's a wrap.